In addition to using the data that you discovered in the audit to revise your agreement so that it's more reflective of market terms, you're going to use that data to facilitate your team's ability to do their own contract negotiations by creating a playbook. Your contracting playbook will be the authority for closing deals. It represents the accumulation and continuous capture of institutional knowledge and enables your team to effectively and efficiently conduct contract negotiations. As you are no doubt well aware, there are higher and better uses of your leadership team's time than to be caught up in the minutia of day-to-day contracting. Creating a playbook ensures that your team can confidently manage contract negotiations without escalating to the C-suite every time a buyer imposes something that's not part of your standard terms. Your playbook needs to be a comprehensive manual that covers the entire contracting process, from initiating a draft to capturing signatures and post-close signatures like storage protocols or operationalizing any unique obligations imposed by your buyer. So you're going to start with policies and procedures. For example, who has signing authority and what are the limits on that authority? You're going to include a buyer's reviewer persona so that your team continues to understand the people that they're selling to and can understand the challenges that the buyer's team faces so that your seller can continue to effectively flex their empathy muscle throughout the redline process. By the way, we have a buyer's reviewer persona that we use for our customers, and we are more than happy to share that with you. If you want to just drop an email to service@22.group, we'll get that out to you right away. You want to include etiquette or best practices that you want your team to practice when redlining. For example, a really good rule is to make sure that you're always explaining any redline changes that you're requesting or any changes that your buyer is requesting that you can't agree to. You want to explain your contract structure and identify each of the agreements that support the sales process and when those agreements are used. You want to include a full copy of each of the agreements and then a full text of each of the provisions. And with the full text of each of the provisions, you want to include a plain English explanation of the provision so that your team understands the risk and the extent of any damages to which your business may be exposed if that risk is realized. For each standard provision, you're also going to include fallback alternatives to which your team can agree and under which conditions those fallback alternatives are acceptable. Some of these fallback provisions should be evident from the data that you uncovered during the audit. Then you're going to take those talking points and you're going to make sure that your team can explain why they can or cannot agree to a buyer's redline change or why your reviewing team is making a modification request. The goal of the playbook is to make sure that each team member involved in the redlining process understands each of the terms in your agreement and the risk that they present to your company if the buyer doesn't agree to your standard provisions. And then they also need to understand why and when an alternative to your standard provisions are acceptable. The playbook is a sort of sales contracting 101 resource that your team can use to trade just enough to be dangerous for knowing enough to be safe and smart. And that will put an end to punting on or hacking contract negotiations. Risk is a business issue, and risk tolerance is a business decision. So when you and your team understand the business risk associated with each provision in your agreement, you understand whether or not you can accept that risk is a business decision. It is not a legal decision. So in addition to empowering your team to avoid escalation to the leadership team with clear explanations of the risk associated with each provision and with clear guidance about how to negotiate those provisions, your playbook also helps you avoid the need to turn to an outside lawyer for advice.